Okay, so we have been mostly focusing on plants and animals in terms of looking at plant and animal cells. However, there are 6 kingdoms of living things, or how biologists classify living things. So we put them into these neat little categories: animals, plants, fungi, protista, bacteria, and archaebacteria. And this little diagram kind of shows you a prokaryotic cell, or a prokaryote, is simple cells. So these are going to be a lot of maybe our single-celled organisms, okay? And then as you go up, even though some protista are still single-celled, some of them can be more than one cell, or they tend to be more complicated with the organelles that are in their cells. Okay, and then of course we get to plants and fungus and animals that tend to be a lot more complicated because they're much larger, so they require thousands to billions of cells. And then those cells work to make organs, and then we have organ systems to work together to make the organism function. So when we talk about plant and animal cells, there are only 2 basic types of cells, plant and animal. And they can be found in all of these different kingdoms. There is no fungi cell or no bacteria cell. A bacteria cell may have qualities of a plant cell, or it may have qualities of an animal cell, but we still call it or classify it as a bacteria. It does not fit in the category of animal or plants. So we just have 2 basic types of cells, but any living thing can have either a plant or animal cell, okay? And then we classify them into one of these 6 categories for living things. This year, we're mainly going to focus on sort of animals and plants. As you go through science, you'll start to focus on these other sort of kingdoms of living things and break them down further. So we're going to talk about plant systems and how those systems work together, so that we can look at how plants repair injuries, and then also how the human body, or humans or other animals, repair their injuries as well, because we want to make sure that we know how different body systems can cooperate to perform specific functions. And now when we refer to the body, we don't necessarily mean the human body. It could be the body of a plant as well. And there are different cells and tissues and organ systems within a plant to help plants repair injuries. So here are some basic parts to the plant. We're not necessarily going to memorize some of these. You will also see me holding a model of a plant, but some of the basic parts of a plant you probably already know, such as the flower. Seeds can be found in different parts. Sometimes they're inside the flower, sometimes they're in a pine cone or the acorn or a piece of fruit. And then you know the leaves, most of you know the stem, and then of course the roots, usually below the soil or ground level. And this picture kind of shows you the parts of a flower itself, so what would be seen up here. And this is where reproduction happens in a flower, in a plant, is usually in the flower. If you take a look in the springtime, you'll notice that even maple trees or birch trees, they all have flowers on them before the leaf kind of blooms and comes out, and we get those beautiful leaves that we see. So here we have a plant that I found in Miss Barry's room. And so this plant doesn't necessarily have any flowers on it right now, or may flower differently. But these leaves, even though they're not perfectly green, right? This green part is where photosynthesis will happen, because that is where the chloroplasts are, the chlorophyll is there in huge amounts, and so it needs sunlight to continue making energy so that these plants can live, okay, so that it can keep living and carrying out its function. And then it's going to need water and carbon dioxide, and you guys breathe throughout the day in Miss Barry's classroom, so you exhale, and so it has plenty of carbon dioxide, and Miss Barry just has to keep watering it. So we can also look at my little model here of a flower. And this flower, it's foam, it's like the cells that you saw, also gives us sort of an inside view, so we can kind of take it apart. So, and we can sort of see the main parts of it. We have the roots down here, which we can't really see the roots in Miss Barry's plant. And then we have the stem that comes up. And then you'll see the leaf, the big green thing. is the leaf, and then this is a tulip, and you'll see the flower at the top, okay? And then there's all sorts of things inside the flower that help reproduction so that we can get more seeds and plant flowers, okay? So again, here are the roots underground. Tulips come from a bulb, that's why you see this big brown sort of thing, because they can be dormant for a while. They're still living, but they're just dormant. And then it grows that stem and some leaves, and then eventually will flower. So photosynthesis in a tulip is going to happen in the leaves, okay? And the stem and the roots will carry water to the leaves. The underside of the leaves will bring in carbon dioxide, and then it'll use water, carbon dioxide, and some of the power that it got from the sunlight to make sugars and oxygen. Okay, so the important parts of plants. So these are the parts that you'll need to know for 6th grade science are the flower, the stem, leaves, and roots. These are all important parts in how flowers or plants reproduce. They are also important parts on how photosynthesis happens. And photosynthesis is when plants take in sunlight into the chloroplast, okay? That's that specialized organelle in a plant cell. And then they use the chemical in there called chlorophyll to make sugar. And sugar is what they'll use as their food source. The role of chloroplasts. So they're green, so I've kind of highlighted the word in green because they have this green pigment called chlorophyll in them. And hopefully we'll figure out how they can help a plant heal itself and then lead us to see how other organisms also can repair injuries. So photosynthesis is the process of a plant making sugar from sunlight. And it doesn't just use sunlight. It goes through all these steps. And they can be really complicated, but I've kind of sort of narrowed them down so it's not as complicated. Once you get into higher grades, you'll be learning more of the specifics and the chemical reactions that happen with photosynthesis. So the leaves on a plant are the main place where photosynthesis is going to happen. They're green. They have chlorophyll inside the chloroplasts that are going to take in that sunlight. And then the sunlight is converted to like a power source, kind of like a solar cell or solar power. It kind of takes that in, and then it's going to use that power and energy to help make food. And a plant's food is sugar, okay? And that sugar is going to have to combine with water and carbon dioxide in order to make their sugar and then release oxygen. So water, sunlight, carbon dioxide are going to help make sugar and oxygen, okay? So then that's where we get our oxygen because the plants don't need that oxygen, so they release it as waste product through the underside of their leaves. Another thing that plants and animals go through, well, animals also go through cellular respiration. Photosynthesis just happens in organisms like plants and some fungi and some protists and some bacteria and some archaebacteria all can photosynthesize, which means make their own food. However, animals cannot. So we need to do something called cellular respiration. Now this means it's happening in each of the individual cells in your body. Sometimes people refer to respiration as breathing. So when you inhale or exhale, that is also known as respiration. But right now we're going to talk about cellular respiration, and that's going to happen in each of your cells, not in your lungs, okay? And both plants and animals do this. Plants don't do this as much as they do the process of photosynthesis, but they also do this as well. And it's the breaking down of molecules of sugar so that they become usable energy. So an organism will take in oxygen. So yes, plants do use some oxygen to respire or go through cellular respiration. The oxygen breaks down the sugar into energy that we can use, okay? So in each of your cells is taking in oxygen right now as you're listening to this and breaking down some sugars so that you have energy to run around or go play basketball after you listen to this or go to dance class. And then the organisms release carbon dioxide and water as waste. So your body collects sort of all that carbon dioxide. You exhale some of it, and some of it is just collected and gets released as waste, just as water does, because in this process, we also make water.